Ladies and gentlemen, you're welcome to the Beyond Africa podcast with me, Ngalim Bernard. Let's go. On Thursday, July 25, 2025, the Constitutional Council of Cameroon will be hearing a legal challenge brought by Professor Maurice Kamto. As you all know, on October 12, Cameroon is organizing its presidential elections, and this year the elections are very critical for two fundamental reasons. The first reason is the president is 92 years old and he's been in power for 42 years. And the second reason is the legality of the candidacy of the leading opposition party leader, Professor Maurice Kamto, has been hanging in the balance. We've had legal discussions on that on this channel. You can always go back to previous videos to review them. I intend to break the legal issues down for everyone to understand. If you don't understand the legal issues, if legal language terrifies you, or if you have not been exposed to the issues concerning these elections, and especially the legal challenges around the elections, this is a time for you to understand this particular one, because the Electoral College is the most important political instrument that influences the elections. But before I continue, ladies and gentlemen, I implore you all to go to the comments section, leave a comment, subscribe, like, and of course, share this video with your friends, your networks, your families, your brothers, your colleagues. The reason is that is where we get the energy to keep on going. And over the next 3 months, we're going to organize more episodes that are going to be educational, highly conversational, insightful, instructive, and of course, entertaining. So you get to find the political scene in Cameroon more interesting, more welcoming, more adaptable. So let's dive in straight into the legal issues of this challenge that Professor Maurice Kamto has brought before the Constitutional Council. So let's dive into the legal issues. What is the context of this legal challenge? First of all, Professor Maurice Kamto brought this legal challenge, and he brought it in his personal name and as a candidate at the elections, not as the leader of his political party. He later resigned from his party and joined Manidem that invested him to run. So what are the core legal arguments in this petition? Professor Kamto asserts that the Electoral College is legally non-existent due to Elecam's failure to publish the National Electoral List as mandated by Article 80 of the Electoral Code. According to him, this omission prevents stakeholders like voters, candidates, and political actors from exercising their fundamental political rights to review and challenge the electoral list, that is, the electoral body of the Electoral College, as provided for under Article 81 of the Electoral Code. And to him, this undermines transparency and can lead to fraud. Elecam did not publish the list on December 30, 2024. Then Article 81 of the Electoral Code grants stakeholders the right to scrutinize electoral lists and file complaints, ensuring the accuracy, integrity, stability, and credibility of the elections. Then Article 48 of the Constitution and Article 3 of the law creating the Constitutional Council empowers the Constitutional Council to oversee the regularity of presidential elections, including the verification of electoral processes. So according to Professor Kamto, even though the electoral list was compiled before the elections, it constitutes part of the electoral process. Therefore, the Constitutional Council has the legal obligation to ensure that this part of the electoral process complies with the law. So he also highlights procedural irregularities. Elecam continued voter registration until July 11, 2025, the date the electoral body was convened by presidential decree without completing the mandatory annual revision process. Elecam also stated that the consultation of voter registrations focused on the finalized electoral list that was published in December 2024, with 7,845,622 registered voters. The National Electoral List was not published or subject to public scrutiny, rendering the convened electoral body legally deficient. And on July 10, 2025, Elecam issued a press release indicating that the revision of the electoral list would continue even after the Electoral College had been convened, suggesting that there is going to be a cleanup, and Professor Kamto calls this arbitrary and violates the principle of transparency. So what is Professor Kamto actually requesting for? First of all, he is requesting that the Constitutional Council should acknowledge the petition and then declare that the Constitutional Council is legally competent to examine it. Because there is an issue with the law. Sometimes you have a problem with the law, but you take it to a court that does not have the legal competence or the jurisdiction to handle that particular case, and the case will be dismissed, not because you don't have a legal problem, but because you have taken it to the wrong court. So whenever somebody takes a case to court, the person first of all asks the court to agree that the court has jurisdiction. And that is why previously Professor Kamto established that the Constitutional Council has the power to review this petition because it falls under the electoral processes as required by the Constitution and the law creating the Constitutional Council. Then on the substantive request, he is asking that the Constitutional Council should declare that the Electoral College convened to elect the president on October 12, 2025 is legally invalid because that list was not published according to Article 18. He also requests that the Constitutional Council should order Elecam to publish a national electoral list within a reasonable time frame so that stakeholders, that is the voters, the political parties, and the candidates can have time to review the list and ensure that there are no irregularities. What are the possible irregularities that could remain hidden in the electoral list and could jeopardize the regularity, transparency, and credibility of the elections unless third parties like the voters and the candidates have access to review the list? The first is duplicate or fictitious voters. One person could be registered more than one time, or inexisting people could be registered on the voters list. Then deceased or ineligible voters. Some people have died, but they are still on the electoral list, and Professor Kamto wants these people to be identified. So it's a hypothesis. At this point, it is a hypothesis because he doesn't have any evidence to prove that there are deceased people on the list, or even ineligible voters. If you are not up to 21 years, you cannot vote. But it's possible that there are some people who are younger than 21 years that are on the list. It's possible that people who have been convicted of crimes are on the list, and the electoral law forbids convicts from voting. It could even be that you are a candidate and you are not even registered on the electoral list because the law requires that every candidate must be registered on the electoral list. Then there could equally be unauthorized additions or omissions. At some point, Elecam could add names or take names out without anybody knowing because no candidate or no political party or no other stakeholder has access to that electoral list. So Elecam could do whatever they want. And there could equally be geographical misrepresentation. You could register in Yaoundé and then your name comes out in Douala. Or you could register in a polling station within one city and your name comes out in another polling station, making it difficult for you to access your right to vote. So these are just a few examples of the problems that could come out from an external view of the electoral list, because as at now, only Elecam has access to that list. And it's also important to exclude all those who are not supposed to be on the electoral list. So what are the broader implications? This petition underscores systemic issues in Cameroon's electoral process, particularly recurring failure to adhere to transparency requirements. Professor Kamto's challenge questions the integrity of the 2025 presidential election, potentially affecting voter confidence and international perception of Cameroon's democratic process. All over the world, Cameroon is not one of those countries that are looked at as one of the best countries in democracy, even across Africa. So giving this case serious attention, looking at it with critical eyes by the Constitutional Council, could give a perception out there that Cameroon's democracy is on the right track. So the outcome could set a precedent for electoral accountability. Elecam has already argued that they did publish the list, but not in the manner that Professor Kamto wants. Elecam has argued that they published the list per council area because they have the discretion on how to publish the list. They have the power to decide how to publish the list. The Electoral Code does not say how that list should be published. So the director of Elecam, the director general of Elecam, used his discretion, according to him, to publish the list per council. Critics may question whether Kamto's petition is a strategic move to delay or disrupt the election, which is possible. Though his legal arguments are grounded in clear statutory violations, they could disrupt the elections if the Constitutional Council orders Elecam to publish the list and stakeholders find irregularities in them. So by way of conclusion, Professor Kamto's petition is a critical test of Cameroon's commitment to the democratic process, especially democratic principles where transparency, public participation, and accountability are critical. You know, you don't talk about democracy without talking about public participation in the processes. You don't talk about accountability and adherence to democratic principles. The Constitutional Council's ruling could either reinforce electoral integrity or expose the systemic flaws, and this would impact the legitimacy of the elections. So this is what I had to say about, I thought it's necessary to make a summary of Professor Kamto's petition before the Constitutional Council, so that when the Constitutional Council sits tomorrow and review the petition, they hear from Professor Kamto, hear from Elecam, and they make their decision, you would at least have an understanding of the issues that were at stake and why the Constitutional Council might have arrived at any direction. Remember, the decisions of the Constitutional Council are final because the Constitutional Council has the final say in the determination of issues regarding the presidential elections. Thank you. Stay tuned. And as always, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share. That is what keeps us going. That is what gives us the energy to come back and share more with you. As I announced earlier, sometimes next week, I'll share a detailed schedule with you where we would have panel discussions, interviews, all discussing critical issues around elections, democracy, and governance, all geared towards the transformation and the development of the African continent. Until then, see you. Ciao.